When we begin to explore why animals and babies seem to stare at you, we have to move away from mysticism and towards something far more grounded, the nervous system. Because what they are responding to is not your personality, not your social identity, not even your words. They are responding to regulation. Long before language develops, long before belief systems form, the human organism learns through the body. A baby enters the world neurologically unfinished. The brain is still wiring itself in response to the emotional climate around it. The infant's survival depends on accurately reading the nervous systems of the adults nearby. Is this environment safe? Is it chaotic? Is it tense? Is it attuned? These questions are not asked consciously. They are asked biologically. And animals operate much the same way. They are exquisitely sensitive to cues of threat or safety. They don't interpret social masks. They don't care about status. They read tone, breath, posture, muscle tension, eye softness. They read coherence. Now here's where the empath comes in. Many empaths develop their sensitivity early in life, often in environments where attunement was inconsistent. To adapt, they became finely tuned to emotional shifts. They learned to sense the unspoken. Over time, that hyper-attunement can mature into something else, a nervous system that has learned to regulate itself in the presence of others. Not perfectly, not always, but often with a quiet steadiness. When you walk into a room carrying relative internal calm, your body communicates that calm before you say a single word. Your breathing is slower. Your movements are less abrupt. Your gaze is softer. This is not mystical energy. This is physiology, and the organisms around you are reading it. A baby's brain, especially in the first year of life, is constantly scanning faces for cues of safety. When it locks eyes with you, it may be because your face is emotionally available. There is no sharpness, no agitation, no fragmentation. The infant nervous system recognizes congruence, the alignment between what is felt and what is expressed, and that alignment feels safe. Animals, too, detect incongruence instantly. A person may speak gently but carry tension in their shoulders and jaw. An animal will trust the body, not the words. If your internal state is relatively integrated, they sense it. Not because you are special in some supernatural way, but because coherence stands out in a world of chronic stress. And let's be honest about the world we live in. Most nervous systems today are dysregulated. Chronic pressure, unprocessed trauma, digital overstimulation. These all fragment attention and tighten the body. When a regulated presence enters that field, it is noticeable. It creates contrast. So when a baby stares at you, it may not be about you as an individual ego. It may be about the nervous system you are inhabiting in that moment. When an animal watches you quietly, it may be registering that you are not a threat, that your energy is not invasive, that your physiology is not broadcasting alarm. There is something profoundly humbling about this, because it suggests that what draws attention is not performance, but presence, not charisma, but regulation, not intensity, but safety. And here is the deeper philosophical layer. Safety is the foundation of connection. Without safety, there is no openness. Without openness, there is no relationship. Empaths, through their own life journeys, often become students of safety, sometimes because they did not always experience it consistently themselves. So perhaps the staring is not a mystery at all. Perhaps it is recognition. Recognition of calm. Recognition of coherence. Recognition of a nervous system that is not at war with itself. And in a world of noise and fragmentation, a regulated presence does not shout. It simply stands out. One of the most fascinating aspects of why babies and animals stare at empaths lies in something we often overlook, the subtle language of the face. Before words, before gestures, before anything consciously communicated, there is the micro-expression. Every flicker of emotion across the face is a signal, and infants and animals are wired to read them with extraordinary precision. For them, a face is a landscape of safety, curiosity, and potential connection. And empaths, often unknowingly, carry a unique fluency in this nonverbal dialect. Consider the infant brain. A baby's visual system is finely attuned to human faces. Within hours of birth, newborns preferentially track eyes. By a few weeks, they can detect minute shifts in expression, a brief tightening around the eyes, the subtle curve of the lips. They are biologically programmed to look for attunement. And attunement, in essence, is a form of trust. The implicit understanding that this being can respond appropriately, that they are present, that they are safe. When a baby fixes their gaze on an empath, they are responding not to words, but to the quiet coherence expressed in the micro movements of the face. Animals function in a similar way, though perhaps even more acutely. Dogs, for example, are known to differentiate between subtle human facial cues that indicate happiness, anger, or anxiety. They are constantly scanning for congruence between expression, tone, and movement. They know instantly if your smile is genuine or forced, if your gaze is soft or aggressive. And empaths, because of their attunement, often carry micro-expressions that reflect authenticity, fleeting, delicate, and incredibly readable. When an animal holds your gaze, it may be because your face communicates honesty, openness, and presence without needing a word to be said. Micro-expressions are not about performing friendliness. In fact, their power lies precisely in their authenticity. An empath does not need to try to be kind or inviting. Often, the sheer act of emotional attunement, noticing their own inner state and subtly regulating it, naturally produces facial expressions that signal safety. There is a softness to the eyes, a relaxed curvature to the lips, a subtle steadiness in posture. And that is profoundly magnetic to beings who read primarily through instinct rather than language. It is also worth noting the philosophical dimension here. In a world that increasingly prizes performance, visibility, and external charisma, the quiet fluency of the empath's micro-expression stands out because it is rooted in being rather than doing. Babies and animals are not evaluating your resume or your social capital. They are responding to the integrity of your presence, the alignment between what is felt internally and what is shown externally. That alignment, communicated in a micro-expression, resonates on a level deeper than cognition. It resonates with the nervous system itself. What this teaches us is profound. Connection is not manufactured. It is discovered through attunement. When someone stares at you with unspoken recognition, it may not be admiration or curiosity in the conventional sense. It may be a response to the subtle, unspoken honesty of your expressions, the way your inner regulation ripples outward and is mirrored in your face. Your presence becomes legible not through language, but through coherence, and those who are biologically tuned to authenticity cannot help but notice. And so, when a baby or an animal holds your gaze, you are witnessing a silent conversation, a wordless acknowledgement that your nervous system, your awareness, and your micro-expressions are in harmony. It is a reminder that empathy is not only felt internally, it is visible externally, and it is readable to anyone who still perceives the world through instinct rather than abstraction. In the end, this gaze is not about them, and it is not about you. It is about the unspoken bridge between presence and recognition, a reminder that authenticity resonates even when it is quiet, subtle, and unnoticed by most. And in that quiet resonance, you leave an imprint that lasts far beyond the blink of an eye. One of the most understated yet powerful qualities that draws animals and babies toward empaths is something I like to call nonverbal permission. It is not permission in the conscious sense. You are not issuing an invitation with words or gestures. Rather, it is the silent language of presence, a subtle communication that says, without saying anything at all, you are safe here. You are free to exist as you are. This is something that empaths often convey naturally because of their attunement to their own inner states and their ability to regulate themselves in the presence of others. To understand this, we have to consider how deeply our nervous systems are wired to detect safety. Humans are mammals first, social animals second. Long before we develop complex thought or language, we rely on nonverbal cues to determine if a situation is secure. Babies and animals operate almost exclusively in this nonverbal domain. A baby's gaze lingers not because of curiosity in the abstract, but because the infant is scanning for coherence, for alignment between facial expression, tone, and bodily energy. An animal watches not because it is being attentive in a cognitive sense, but because it is perceiving, in real time, whether your energy is threatening, neutral, or welcoming. Empaths, by virtue of their sensitivity, often exude what can be described as a spacious presence. They do not push, pull, or manipulate the environment unconsciously. They observe They allow, they respond. This quality, the ability to simply exist without imposing, communicates a kind of nonverbal permission that resonates deeply with instinct-driven beings. You may not realize it, but when you enter a room and sit quietly, when you respond to the world with curiosity rather than judgment, you are broadcasting a message. I am here. You are allowed to be here too. It is remarkable how this principle operates on a physiological level. The nervous system is exquisitely tuned to subtle cues. Animals can detect changes in muscle tension, breathing patterns, and micromovements. Babies can sense incongruence between words and feelings long before they can articulate it. When your nervous system is regulated, when your body carries calm, balanced energy, it allows others to feel safe in your presence without effort. This is not learned behavior. It is a biological signal. Nonverbal permission is, at its core, an act of coherence, the alignment of intention, awareness, and physiology. Philosophically, this carries a profound lesson. In a society that emphasizes doing over being, many of us mistake influence for force, connection for control. Empaths, however, understand connection in a more subtle, almost counterintuitive way. Influence is not exerted through dominance, persuasion, or external signals. It is exerted through attuned presence. To allow others space, to silently communicate that they can exist without expectation or judgment, is one of the most potent ways to create resonance. Babies and animals recognize this immediately because they live in a state of constant attunement themselves. This is why so often an animal will approach you slowly, study you, and stare without moving. It is why a baby's gaze will linger longer than seems necessary. They are not testing you. They are responding to a silent signal of acceptance and safety. This is not magical. It is biological, evolutionary, and deeply real. And it is something that empaths, through their very attunement and presence, provide naturally. The deeper implication is that our power as empaths lies not in what we say, what we do, or how we perform, but in the integrity of our presence. When your energy does not impose, when your nervous system is regulated, when you allow others simply to be, you create a space that is magnetic. The staring is not about you or them. It is about recognition of safety, authenticity, and permission. And so, the quiet truth emerges. Presence itself is a language. In that language, empaths speak fluently. The animals, the babies, the beings around you, they understand this fluency instinctively. And in recognizing it, they remind us of a simple, timeless truth. Safety and allowance are more powerful than words, and being present with integrity is one of the most profound gifts we can offer the world. There is a quality in empaths that is difficult to articulate, yet impossible to miss: emotional depth. It is a subtle gravity, an internal resonance that draws attention without intention. When we talk about babies and animals staring at you, it is often this depth that they are sensing, even if they cannot name it. Depth is not about performing intensity or dramatizing emotion. It is about the capacity to feel fully, consciously, and authentically, and to carry that feeling without being overwhelmed by it. Empaths often develop this naturally. Life teaches them, sometimes painfully, to sit with their own emotional currents, to observe, to reflect, and to integrate experience rather than react unconsciously. Babies are naturally drawn to this. Their developing nervous systems are scanning constantly, not for novelty alone, but for meaningful emotional cues. When they stare at someone, they are detecting a resonance in the person's affective field. Is this someone who understands? Who responds? Who carries emotion without letting it become threatening? Babies are seeking attunement, and attunement requires depth. They are unconsciously recognizing that in your presence, emotional signals are not chaotic. They are coherent. They are felt and expressed in alignment. Animals operate in a similar way, though through an entirely instinctual lens. Dogs, cats, and even horses are highly sensitive to emotional nuance. They do not process emotion conceptually. They feel it somatically through body language, micromovements, and subtle energy shifts. When an empath enters their field, they may notice patterns that go beyond immediate actions: the rhythm of breathing, the weight of attention, the steadiness in movement. These are indicators of internal depth and self-regulation. A gaze is held not because of curiosity alone, but because of recognition of emotional coherence that signals trustworthiness and presence. What is remarkable is that this depth often emerges from the empath's own history. Many empaths have experienced inconsistent caregiving, relational trauma, or environments where emotion was dangerous or denied. In response, they cultivate a heightened internal awareness, a capacity to navigate the inner landscape with sensitivity and self-reflection. This makes them exceptional at maintaining presence without projection, at sensing and responding without over-identifying, at carrying intensity without breaking. And it is precisely this quality that draws attention from beings who live in the immediate reality of feeling, babies and animals. Emotionally shallow environments, by contrast, are invisible to them. They are uninteresting because they lack the subtle texture that the nervous system perceives. Depth, then, is magnetic not because it is dramatic or performative, but because it is real. It communicates safety, authenticity, and relational possibility in ways words never could. The staring of a baby or animal is a mirror. They see the emotional integrity of your presence reflected back to them, and it is arresting because so few environments offer that. Philosophically, this points to a profound truth. Connection is rooted in authenticity. Babies and animals do not respond to social pretense. They respond to the full expression of what is present and alive. They are drawn not to perfection, but to coherence. They are drawn to the individual who has learned to carry emotion fully, without collapsing or overwhelming, and who allows that depth to exist in space without coercion. And so, when you notice that lingering gaze, recognize it not as curiosity, but as recognition of depth. The attention is a silent acknowledgement that you embody a continuity of emotional experience, a steadiness, a presence, a complexity that resonates with beings attuned to instinct and feeling. The stare is not passive observation. It is attunement in its most primal form. In the end, emotional depth is more than an internal experience. It is a form of communication. It speaks without words, signals without effort, and resonates without expectation. And when it is recognized by those who perceive the world through instinct, it reminds us that the capacity to feel deeply is also the capacity to connect profoundly, wordlessly, and universally. There is a subtle yet profound quality in empaths that often goes unnoticed by the casual observer. The ability to allow. Not allow in the passive sense, not tolerating or ignoring, but the deeper, almost paradoxical ability to simply exist alongside another being without imposing, controlling, or demanding. This is a trait that babies and animals notice instinctively. They are highly attuned to the energy that surrounds them, and they can tell the difference between presence that pressures and presence that permits. When a baby locks eyes with you, when a dog pauses to watch you quietly, it may not be curiosity alone. It may be recognition of the unspoken space you provide. Empaths are uniquely positioned to embody this kind of non-intrusive presence. Having lived in a world where emotional boundaries are often blurred, where others' feelings are projected onto them and absorbed as their own, empaths learn, sometimes out of necessity, to cultivate inner spaciousness. They discover the importance of observing before reacting, of sensing before intervening, of simply holding space for themselves and others. This is not detachment, it is attentiveness. It is the ability to be fully present without forcing interaction, without demanding compliance, without manipulating outcomes. For babies, this quality is particularly magnetic. Infants are biologically wired to scan their environment for safety cues, but they are also wired to test boundaries gently. They will reach, withdraw, cry, smile, and stare, all as ways of gauging the responsiveness of their caregivers. When they encounter an empath who does not push, who does not respond with alarm or overreaction, they sense that they are in a safe relational field. The gaze lingers because it is met with unspoken acceptance, a permission to simply be. Animals, too, are instinctually drawn to this allowance. Predatory instinct aside, many species are incredibly sensitive to the energetic pressures around them. Dogs, cats, horses, even birds notice when your energy does not demand, when it does not impose. They approach slowly, cautiously, but are more likely to engage when they feel that their autonomy is respected. The empath's presence communicates a subtle truth. You are free to choose, free to explore, free to exist without interference. That freedom is a form of safety, and it is profoundly compelling. Psychologically, this capacity for allowance is closely tied to nervous system regulation. When an empath has learned to hold their own emotional state without being hijacked by external stressors, their body communicates calm and containment. That energy is legible to the instinct-driven minds of babies and animals alike. They do not need verbal reassurance. They do not need explanation. They feel coherence in your presence. And coherence in this sense is equivalent to permission. Permission to inhabit their own experience safely within your shared space. Philosophically, this teaches a deeper lesson about the nature of relational power. So often, connection is confused with control, influence, or effort. Empaths remind us that the most profound relationships are not built through manipulation or demand, but through presence that honors autonomy. It is the paradox of power. True connection emerges not when we try to elicit it, but when we provide the space for it to arise naturally. The staring of a baby or an animal is a mirror of this truth, reflecting back the subtle magnetism of allowance. Ultimately, the ability to allow is a practice in trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the other, trust in the silent intelligence of relational energy. When you offer this kind of space consistently, it communicates something primal and universal, that you are safe, steady, and present. And when this quality is recognized, it draws attention, not through spectacle, but through resonance. In the end, what babies and animals are responding to is not curiosity or coincidence. They are responding to a presence that respects freedom, a gaze that does not press, a space that does not demand. Allowance, in its quiet power, becomes a form of communication, one that transcends words, transcends species, and reminds us that sometimes the most profound influence we can have on the world is to simply hold space and let life unfold in our presence. When we reach the final layer of understanding why animals and babies stare at empaths, it is crucial to ground ourselves in reality. This is not magic. There is a tendency to frame these experiences as mystical, as though empaths radiate some supernatural aura that irresistibly draws attention. And while the feeling can indeed be extraordinary, the truth is far more tangible and perhaps more profound. What is happening is a biological, psychological, and relational phenomenon rooted in sensitivity, coherence, and attunement. The beings around you are not perceiving your thoughts or your intentions. They are perceiving the organization of your nervous system, the alignment between your internal states and your external expression, and the way your presence communicates safety, authenticity, and steadiness. Consider the nervous system as a kind of silent orchestra. Each thought, feeling, and bodily sensation produces subtle vibrations, microsignals that ripple outward whether we intend them to or not. For most people, this orchestra is chaotic. Stress, unresolved trauma, distraction, and reactive patterns create dissonance. But empaths, through practice, self-awareness, or even natural predisposition, often cultivate internal harmony. Their internal signals are coherent. Their energy does not clash with itself, and this coherence is legible to those whose perception is instinctual. Babies, whose survival depends on reading cues accurately, notice the difference. Animals, whose lives are dictated by safety, threat, and trust, also notice it instinctively. What makes this recognition so compelling is that it operates below the level of conscious thought. Infants and animals do not understand human psychology, nor do they rely on reasoning. They respond to patterns in energy, subtle rhythms in expression, and the emotional climate you emit. When your internal world is relatively calm and regulated, it communicates. Here is a being whose inner life is organized, whose presence is safe to approach, whose energy does not impose. And in a world saturated with fragmented attention, overstimulation, and emotional turbulence, that quiet coherence stands out. It arrests attention, not because it demands it, but because it is naturally readable and trustworthy. There is a philosophical dimension to this as well. Much of human interaction relies on performance, projecting confidence, controlling perception, or shaping outcomes. Empaths often bypass this entirely. They do not need to impress or manipulate. They simply are. Their presence carries an integrity that resonates with the instinct-driven perception of babies and animals. This is why the experience can feel mystical. It transcends ordinary logic and social expectation. But it is not magic. It is embodiment, a subtle yet profound alignment of internal and external states that communicate safety, coherence, and trustworthiness without effort. It also teaches a larger lesson about the nature of perception itself. The beings around us are constantly scanning for honesty in presence, authenticity in energy, and coherence in expression. When we cultivate self-awareness, regulate our nervous system, and allow our internal experience to be congruent with our external signals, we become legible to others in a deep and primal way. This is not something we manufacture. It is something we nurture. And when nurtured, it elicits recognition from those who perceive primarily through instinct. In the end, what babies and animals are responding to is a fundamental truth. Coherence is magnetic. Presence that is aligned, regulated, and authentic draws attention not because it performs, but because it communicates reliability and safety at a level beyond words. It reminds us that our influence does not depend on skillful persuasion, social status, or charisma. Our influence depends on the integrity of our presence, the harmony of our nervous system, the congruence of our energy, and the steadiness of our being. So when you notice those lingering gazes, recognize them as acknowledgement, not mystery. They are witnessing something elemental, a being whose internal world and external presence are in balance, a being who offers safety, authenticity, and coherent attention in a world often defined by chaos. And in that recognition, you are reminded of a timeless truth. Presence itself is not merely experienced. It is perceived, it resonates, and it leaves a lasting imprint that words alone could never convey.